I'd like to welcome Paige Gaines to the next episode of Station 911. I'm so delighted to have Paige here this morning. This is something I've looked forward to for a long time because this is such an important topic. It's so critical that we talk about this, and Paige's message is just incredible. So welcome, Paige. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I agree the topic is very much so necessary and important to talk about. Getting that information out there is what's going to help us. So absolutely.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit this morning about the statistics, and Paige, you could share with us some of the suicide statistics and what that looks like right now, why this is so important.
No, absolutely. So the numbers are increasing. One in particular group is within, Black youth. That's skyrocketed within the past 3 to 4 years. Teens has skyrocketed within the past few years. So it's just been a challenge. But I also believe that although the numbers are rising, it's definitely comforting to know that people are coming forth and it's being reported properly and that the conversation is actually happening and that we're understanding it to be what it is. So, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, but unfortunately they are rising.
Yeah, and we are seeing that in the first responder community. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. I think there's some stigma attached. A lot of times people feel like, well, if I'm having a problem and I reach out, there must be something wrong with me or I'm weak. And I keep thinking it's just the opposite. It takes courage to reach out and say, hey, you know what? I need help. Things aren't perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. So how do we start that process?
Absolutely. It's really just about being transparent. I'm a certified peer specialist, which allows me to use my shared experience to help other individuals. So me being transparent about my own, I'm a suicide survivor myself 2 times, and being transparent about my experience, the things that I went through, the personal stigma that I went through, the reaction from family, the reaction from friends and the community. I think just being as open and honest as we can and being vulnerable is definitely key to opening up that conversation and decreasing that stigma. People love to be able to relate, like we have something in common. It makes us comfortable. So even in this uncomfortable conversation, finding that space to relate and to say, you know what, I'm not by myself is definitely, I believe, is one of the biggest keys to decreasing the stigma and the numbers.
Yeah. Full disclosure, people might be wondering how we got connected. So we both teach for GIPSTIC, which for folks that aren't familiar or aren't from Georgia, that's the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. And so a couple of years ago, we were both scheduled to do some training. And you trained police officers on this topic. And I happened to be training on a mental health topic right after you. And I didn't have the benefit of hearing your story, but I did have the benefit of seeing the reaction and the impact that you left on that group of police officers. I think you had shared your personal story with them. They were just blown away. And so that when I heard that and saw the impact, I was very anxious to connect with you.
No, it's been exciting. I know that I actually recall seeing you in the back of the room towards the end. So definitely connected. And then I recall you coming to introduce yourself when you first joined Advantage. So we've been connected. So it's exciting to be back and talking about such an important topic. So I appreciate, again, being here and having this opportunity to share my story and to share my experience.
Thank you. Paige, you mentioned something a minute ago about the impact that your journey had in terms of family members and being vulnerable. Could you share a little bit about your story and what that was like?
Sure. So I began having symptoms of depression at the age of 10. And it led to extreme isolation to where I was beginning to have suicidal ideations, probably about 11 or 12. And that's when I had my first attempt at the age of 12 years old. I survived, but nobody knew exactly what happened. I wasn't taken to the hospital or anything like that, but I did have an attempt and it went unknown. And then by the age of 22, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I will never forget being in the actual hospital and they're asking me all these questions. And they asked that, have you had an attempt before? And I remember saying yes. And my parents were sitting there and their eyes just got big, like, how did we miss this? And from that moment forward, I still struggled and I still had challenges, but I knew it was important for me to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I had to educate my family and we had to make it together. So me being vulnerable enough to say, hey, no, I wasn't okay at this age. Now I'm not okay right now. I need your help. And me being able to say, hey, I am suicidal right now. And then knowing those proper steps and things like that, it really stemmed from being vulnerable and being in a place of just complete, I need your help. And I think that's a challenge, but like you said, it makes you more courageous. I was listening to a speaker the other day and they said, being scared is okay and having fear is okay, but doing it while scared is what courage really is. I was like, oh, wow, like it doesn't disappear, but doing it while you're afraid and doing it while you're fearful is what courage really is. And so I stuck by that and it stuck with me since I've heard it. But relating it back to my story, it took a lot of hard work and I'm proud of myself now. But at that moment, it was very much so uncomfortable. But it takes a big courageous step to know that you deserve to, have a full life and to feel better.
Yes. And I love what you said about having that support. Once you stepped into that uncomfortable space and shared, and I can only imagine your parents not knowing about the previous attempt, to come full circle, and then to have that support to be embraced. In the fire service in particular, we often talk about how there's nothing we do alone. Nothing. We run into burning buildings as a team and we come out as a team. And that's such a great life lesson because, um, when we're speaking about courage, we are afraid. Let's be honest, we are afraid running in, but we have each other and we look out for each other. So, in spite of being afraid, you're still stepping through that doorway, whether it's a literal doorway or a metaphorical doorway. It's still, you do it with help. Nobody gets there alone. And I think that's what I'm hearing in your message is that you were able to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love you saying that we go in together and we come out together. We don't do things alone. And I think that's such an important piece because sometimes we get stuck inside of our own head and we feel as if we're alone when in reality we have so many supports that are around us. We just have to learn how to again be vulnerable and reach out. So that's definitely been my experience. I've become a lot more comfortable. My support system is awesome. I'm okay in saying today is not my best day. I'm okay in being in therapy and having, a really challenging session and having to be open and honest about what's really going on. So again, building that support system is definitely important. So I'm actually going to take that with me today. I love having key takeaways. So I'm going to take that away with me because I definitely believe it's a team effort. It's definitely a team effort.
It is. And I'm so grateful for what those, how to apply those lessons. It transcends all the different areas of our lives. No matter what you think about, isn't it better to do that with support, with people that care about you and you care about them? That's what gets us through. I used to serve at an HIV clinic, and I'm still a part of it actually, but for the last 6 or 7 years, Live Forward in Athens is near and dear to me. And when somebody gets a diagnosis of HIV, it's pretty challenging. That nobody is prepared to hear that news. And for that reason, we don't do any testing on Fridays because we don't want to send somebody out the door and have to go through a weekend of that kind of news all by themselves. So if we can do it on Monday through Thursday, then we know there are supports, counseling, people that will be there with you. And being there is really the key, I think, with all of what we're talking about. It's just not being alone, not isolating.
No, definitely. And, isolation is the number one. People always ask me, well, how do I know if I'm depressed, or how do I know if my friend is depressed or my child? And I ask them, well, are they alone a lot? And they say, well, they like being alone. It's like, but it's the frequency. Are they completely isolated? Are they isolated from everything, things that they enjoy doing, people they enjoy being around? Just that intense loneliness can really just start to take a toll on us and lead us into the suicidal ideation. So definitely, isolation is one of the top symptoms, actually. As well as a few other things, but that is my ticker that it goes off in my brain when I see that.
Yeah. Do you work on safety plans when you're talking with? Could you elaborate a little more on what that looks like for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, definitely. So a safety plan, just simply put, is a plan that we put into place of what would happen if you were to have a suicidal ideation. So just like we would have a plan for any other emergency, it's the exact same thing. So it begins with what are the symptoms, and then we go through what are some coping strategies, and then we go through how can I remain safe. So can I go sit in this room because it's safer? Or can I be with this individual because it's safer? So then you start to identify those safety boundaries of what can I do in this moment? And then from there, you list out your support system, whether it be doctors or friends or family. And then actually at the bottom, you sign a contract to yourself, making it known that this is my plan for my life. This is me wanting to survive. This is me wanting to get past this moment. And that's why we have a plan in place. So definitely do a lot of safety plans. I personally have a safety plan that I actually update and refer to frequently, because it's actually empowering knowing that there's something put in place for me if I am in crisis, but I made it myself. It was my decision. Nobody's telling me what to do. It's something that I created, something that I know will work for me. And I think a lot of times we lose our voice in crisis. And a lot of people try to speak for us, like, no, they need to go here. This will be best for them. But that plan really empowers that individual to say, no, this is what's necessary for me. So I love a safety plan. You can look it up on Google. There are various ones, but there is one that's just a plain basic one. It'll pop right up. You can print it out. You can fill it out on the computer. There's just so many different versions of safety plans now. And I'm sure there's an app for it as well. I can't name it off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's an app for a safety plan as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll include in the links below, I'll include something for a safety plan. We carry one around with us in our crisis intervention unit. That was just something we found out when we Googled it. And I love what you said. It is empowering to have that safety plan that is self-authored. It's your plan. It's not somebody else's plan. You own it. It's yours. I think when we're in crisis, we feel so disempowered and not heard, that having something tangible that you can go to and look at and reflect on, and like you said, maybe change over time as things change, and have that plan in place. It's so important. I was thinking about when you said that in my career as a firefighter, we never had that. We never talked about this topic. And yet I knew people who were close to me who were really suffering. Two people I know did have suicide attempts. And I feel like there was a failure in place because we do things together. We're supposed to support each other. And they probably didn't feel safe reaching out. And I totally get it. Because in our department at the time, if you wanted to go to EAP, you had to first stop at the fire chief's office and request it. Could you imagine going to your boss and saying like, I have a substance use issue and I'm really depressed. And by the way, can I get that referral? And then the chief is looking at the schedule and, well, you're supposed to drive a fire truck tonight. I don't know how I feel about this. And then it can become punitive instead of treatment. So it's complicated.
No, I can only imagine. And honestly, that is a hindrance for many individuals. Their privacy, just simply put, their privacy of what's going on, who they may want to know, and getting help through that program. So there were, and I'm sure there still are, a lot of barriers for treatment. But I can only imagine that being one. It kind of makes you feel a little defeated and unseen. I can only imagine.
It does. And then thankfully they did change that policy. It is anonymous now, but there's still a bit of stigma around EAP because like in law enforcement, there've been cases where somebody reached out for help and then was immediately put on desk duty, had to turn their firearm in. And so when you're trying to empower somebody, that message feels very disempowering right from the beginning. And if you see that happen to someone else in your department, right, how likely are you to go in and reach out for help? So it kind of feeds the silence and the isolation. So yeah, we have a long ways to go to make this better.
But I also think that we've made a lot of progress just having Gypstick, having that conversation, having peers be involved in certain situations, and then just learning those numbers, having question, persuade, and refer. I definitely believe that there is progress being made. I also know being in the field for so long, it is discouraging at times because you're like, am I actually making a difference? But all it takes is just that one individual coming up to you and saying, hey, you saved my life, or thank you for offering this information, now I can help somebody else. So as like I said, it's just always, it's both sides. It's definitely both sides, but I think it definitely points to the fact of self-care and having to take care of yourself in order to help somebody else. You have to be full in order to give back.
Yes, yes. And I've found it to be really amazing how people like yourself have turned pain into purpose. One of the two people that I know from the fire department who had a similar experience is a peer counselor as well in New York. And God only knows how many lives you've both saved by doing the work that you do. That's the stuff that gives me hope. Promoting the message, talking about it, getting it out there. Uh, but it is hard because you don't necessarily measure the impact. You just have to trust in the process, right?
Exactly. I wish there was a way, but it may just kind of throw you off a little bit. But again, like you said, trusting that what you're doing is good work and trusting that it is helping somebody. It can be a challenge. Like I said, being in the field and working in mental health, I've had to take a step back and recognize burnout and recognize compassion fatigue and just all these different things, and learning how to take care of myself, and learning how necessary it is in order to not be discouraged and in order to completely give my all within the situation while educating people is definitely a big lesson that has been learned.
Yeah. Paige, have you had that experience? I'm sure you have, where people have come back and said, "Thank you so much. You've changed my life." Um, there's no pay in the world that even comes close to that feeling.
No, absolutely. I actually worked with the youth probably, gosh, I met her 4 or 5 years ago, and it was her freshman year of college, and she had just been diagnosed, and she was just really struggling, and she just recently graduated and bought her first car and is living by herself, and she's just doing all these awesome things that at one point in time she didn't think were going to be possible. So having her come back and say, the class she taught me and the advice she gave me really changed my life, it's definitely rewarding. But that story always sticks out to me. So I'm like, gosh, I saw you in the very beginning, and now I see all these wonderful things that you've accomplished. It's rewarding. It makes the job worth it for sure.
Yeah, and those are the things that we hold on to when we have maybe a challenging day, and right, so it brings us back to why we're doing what we do.
Yes, absolutely. Why we do what we do. That's definitely, it's to save lives. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One time, my partner in Athens, Carl, who's on the ACCPD, was we were getting coffee somewhere, and someone came up in line behind us and said, "Hey, you don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember you." He goes, "No, you don't." And so I had to prove it to him. I mean, like, talked about where we met, what happened, and he reached out and shook our hands and said, "Y'all don't realize that was it for me. You saved my life. I've been through treatment. I'm out the other side of this thing." And he talked about how wonderful, how many nice things were going on in his life. And oh my gosh, I could ride that wave for like a month. I just felt so great, so happy for him. But had we not had that chance encounter, we would never know, right? And
No, definitely. And I think hearing people's recovery stories definitely gives us that additional hope and that reassurance, like, okay, we know recovery is possible. But sometimes, I know, speaking just personally, if I'm teaching a class and I leave and I'm like, okay, like, I hope I helped somebody, but coming again in contact with somebody and they show you that what you taught them or how you helped them change their lives, it's like, okay, it's just that energy and that hope that I need it for myself to keep doing and doing my why and figuring out how to continue to help people. It's just that extra energy that I enjoy getting when especially when I'm like tired.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned self-care. I just wondered what that looks like for you, and maybe some takeaways people can get from that.
for sure. So my self care has been a journey. I am a writer, so I write a lot. I try to write every morning. That's my go to. I love to meditate. That's my go to as well. Meditation brings a lot of clarity and it decreases my anxiety a lot. And it just keeps me steady and present. So, practicing mindfulness and being within that moment. I heard somebody say, being mindful and staying present prevents or discourages anxiety and depression. So if we're too focused on that future, then we're anxious. And if we're too focused on that past, then we could be a little bit depressed about it. But if we're in that moment and staying present, you can practice gratitude. There's just so many benefits of being present. So meditation, mindfulness, journaling, and then my favorite, which is therapy. Those are all pieces of my self-care. So, and I have to have all of those pieces. And I've recently added in exercising. So that's been a challenge, but I'm up for it. So I'm consistently expanding my self care plan because the healthier I get, the more I'm going to actually need. My brain has gotten used to certain things. So if I meditated for 5 minutes 5 years ago, I probably need to boost up to like 15 minutes now. So just continuously adjusting it. It's really like going to the gym and getting in shape. Like that first day, you could do like a mile run. And then 3 months from then, you could do like a 2 to 3 mile run, whatever it may be. I always like to tell people adjusting that self care and switching it up a little bit is great for our brain, it's great for our health. And it's really important when you're dealing with certain challenges to have a wide range of coping skills.
Oh, amen. I'm right with you. I meditate, journal, have a gratitude journal. It's powerful, but it's a habit. It's something that takes a little bit of patience and persistence, but the benefits are so huge.
No, absolutely. And consistency and, like you said, patience and just knowing, trusting that process, knowing that
Yeah.
this is going to benefit me in the long run, and just being within that moment and practicing and knowing it's good for you. And it's time to, people kind of think self-care is selfish, and it's not really selfish. You want to be the best you can be so you can be the best for other individuals and for your relationships and for your job and whatever the case may be. So self-care is not selfish. I will make that a takeaway. It's
Yes.
definitely necessary.
Yes, love that. I hope everybody listening writes that down. It's not selfish. Just like reaching out for help is not weakness, it's courage. Uh,
Absolutely.
one one of my favorite takeaways from the fire department. I had a captain who said he always talked about shaking things up. And he meant that in every respect. He's like, drive a different way to work for God's sake. Like, break that routine. Just keep challenging yourself to step outside that routine and make it better. And I really admired him. It was just great advice.
No, I love that. And that's something else I'm going to take away from you today. Shaking it up. I agree. I actually just learned a few weeks ago, and it really piqued my interest because it's like we understand things, but to hear it in certain words and certain phrases just kind of sets a tone. And my therapist said that our mind has to continuously have new experiences to remain healthy. And I was like, well, like, duh, like that makes so much sense, but I never thought about it that way. So, like you said, shaking things up, taking a different route to work, you just never know the impact that it can actually have. So, continuously having new experiences definitely promotes positive mental health.
Yeah. Any other takeaways or words of wisdom, Paige, that people should know about, especially around this topic? Somebody watching or that will watch this may be like, yeah, I'm really struggling. What is your message to that person?
My message would be is that you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. There are so many resources. There are so many individuals that want to assist, and you are a lot stronger than possibly what she can feel at that moment. Because just coming to get help is a huge step of courage. And so I would definitely say my main takeaway for whoever's listening is that you are not alone. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I can't say it enough. You're here, and there are just so
Yes.
many people that want to help and want to assist. We just have to take that step. So you're not alone, and just try taking that first step.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you. That's that is the first step. And I think once you take that step, help is already there. You just have to do it.
Absolutely. I love that. Yes. Yes, for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, Paige, your expertise. You have just lovely positive energy, and I can't wait to share this message with everybody.
Thank you for having me. I love it. I love the conversation. And I always love spreading the message. So thank you for having me.